미술관의 관장이신 티머시 럽 관장님이십니다. 럽 관장님께서는 버먼트의 미들베리 대학교와 뉴욕 대학교에서 미술사학을 공부를 하신 후에 그다음에 이제 건축하고 현대미술 쪽의 전문가이시고요. 그 후에 여러 유수한 미술관의 관장을 역임을 하셨습니다. 뭐 예를 들면 다트머스 대학교의 후드 미술관, 신시내티 미술관, 그 다음에 이제 클리브랜드 미술관 관장님을 거쳐서 현재는 2009년부터 필라델피아 미술관의 관장으로 재직 중이십니다. 오늘 발표해 주실 제목은 큰 계획을 세워라입니다. 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
Well, good morning, and thank you for all of you for coming to this program, but most of all, thanks to the President and staff of the Korea Foundation for their hospitality and for the invitation to participate in this event. Here you see the Philadelphia Museum of Art on your screen on the banks of the Schuylkill River in the wonderful city of Philadelphia. And our title. The Philadelphia Museum acquired by gift its first piece of Korean art, a small buncheong dish decorated with a stamped chrysanthemum design that dates to the 15th century in 1903, little more than 20 years after a treaty of peace, amity, commerce, and navigation had been negotiated between Korea and the United States. Philadelphia was then, again in 1903, the third largest city in the country, with a population of nearly 1.3 million citizens. Its museum, which had been founded in 1876 on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the founding of the United States, was one of the first of its type, that is to say, a private museum founded for the benefit of the public, with education at the very heart of its mission. Today, it's one of our country's finest museums with strengths in American, European, and Asian art. And with a nod to Robert, I should say, although we often call ourselves encyclopedic, we are anything but. We just cover part of the world. There's that dish from 1903. And here a later addition to the collection, one of the finest pieces we have of Korean art, a 12th century Goryeo Dynasty vase that was acquired in 1974, actually from a museum just across the city from the PMA, the Penn Museum. A wonderful, wonderful Celadon vase that was once in the collection of the great American financier and collector J. Pierpont Morgan, which was in his collection actually cataloged as a Chinese vase, not a Korean vase. And this was seen just, I think, this past year, Dr. Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, at the great exhibition of Korean works in American collections that was shown at the National Museum of Korea. Now today our holdings of Korean art number more than 300 objects. They constitute one of the most prominent, if not the largest, collections of its type in our country and represent the Philadelphia Museum of Art's ongoing commitment, which began, as you heard a moment ago, early in its history and continues to this day, to acquire, display, and interpret notable examples of Asian art, including the arts of Korea, for its audiences. It's not my intention here to chronicle the development of our holdings of Korean art. This has in fact been done admirably in a catalog of our collection that was published in 2008 under the auspices of the Korean National Research Institute of Cultural Heritage. And although I'm pleased to say that this publication is already somewhat out of date because we have continued quite actively to add works to our collection by purchase as well as by gift. And here's one example of that, a wonderful 19th century Joseon Dynasty 10-panel screen illustrating lotus with birds and insects and the like in colors on paper. Here's a detail of that screen. Although my purpose today is not to speak primarily about our collection, it's important to emphasize here and at the outset that our commitment to its development remains quite strong. We understand, as I suspect most everyone in this room does, that such work, that is to say the work of developing a collection, is in a word foundational, in that it provides both the tools and the motivation for research, display, and interpretation. That is to say, those activities that are at the very heart of any museum's work, including ours. Nevertheless, as a colleague of mine recently observed, if the 20th century had been a period of collections building in the United States, including the building of collections of Korean art in a few museums in our country, then in the 21st century, it is our task, and it's a very happy one in my opinion, to focus primarily on the activation of the great collections that we have assembled. Simply put, the task before us today is not only or even principally about continuing to strengthen our collections, although that, as I stressed a moment ago, is important, but rather our task is about bringing them to life, to define as creatively as possible how they can be utilized to serve our goals of engaging and educating new audiences. And in this regard, I am mindful of the keynote speech this morning, which emphasized the importance of looking into collection storage, dusting off objects that hadn't been studied or displayed for a long, long time, and getting them out for the view, not simply of curatorial staff or research visitors, but also to the public as well. So this task, again, of activating our collections, I think all of us would agree, has taken on, and again, this echoes a point that's already been made, an even greater significance today than it may have had in the past, because globalism is bringing us together far more closely than we ever have been before, and as a consequence, broader cultural understanding and a greater appreciation of history have grown in importance, and one could even say in economic value. What I would like to share with you then this morning is both how we have been addressing this goal, again, of activating our collections at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and what we hope to do in this regard in the future. It's a story that begins with the generous support and encouragement we have received from South Korea itself. First, from the Korean National Research Institute of Cultural Heritage, which, as I mentioned a moment ago, nearly a decade ago provided both scholarly and financial support to produce a comprehensive catalog of the museum's holdings of Korean art, holdings that had languished largely in storage, hadn't been seen in any great numbers before, and certainly hadn't not been sufficiently researched. Basic research on the collection and the dissemination of information about it both in print and digital form is, of course, essential for any subsequent work. And it is to the great credit of our colleagues in the Korean cultural establishment that they recognize the significance and lasting value of such an investment in the work that they've been doing and funding over the past decade and more. And I should underscore here that that work is hardly done, and I think most of us would agree, and it needs to continue in the future. Now, more recently, the Korea Foundation has provided encouragement, and that matters, as well as financial support, first by conducting, again, a point that's been made several times already, and I think will continue to be made throughout this session, first by conducting the annual curatorial workshops that have proved to be invaluable to the staff of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, to be sure, and many other American museums, by opening up, as they have, new perspectives on Korean art and establishing a network of curators who now collaborate and support each other's work. I can't underscore how important that is as well. And secondly, of course, as you've heard a few minutes ago, by funding important exhibitions and reinstallation projects. Now, even before we began to benefit from the assistance of these agencies whose purpose is, of course, to increase the knowledge and appreciation of Korean art abroad, we had begun to gather support at home in our own backyard. In this regard, the founding in 1997 of the Korean Heritage Group in Philadelphia and at the Philadelphia Museum of Art represented a very important step forward. This association of individuals, most of them but not all, Korean Americans in the greater Philadelphia region came together to champion the cause of Korean art in the museum and to persuade others, both friends and donors, to get involved. Building awareness, encouraging participation, and giving a community a place of honor within the institution have been and will continue to be important tools not only for building our collection, but also doing more with it. An even more significant step taken by the museum was the establishment in 2006 of a curatorial position dedicated exclusively to Korean art. This position was endowed, that is to say, permanently funded a few years later, making it the only endowed curatorship of its type among American museums. Hyun-Soo Woo, someone I'm fond of making blush in public places, she's here with us today in the audience. A Korean art historian trained here in Seoul at Awa Women's University has held this position for the past 7 years, and held it with distinction, I should add. Her presence both at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and in the field at large has been enormously important in increasing the profile of Korean art in our institution. She has been a persistent advocate for the ongoing development of our collection, often appearing in my office with recommendations for new acquisitions. She's made important acquisitions that have filled significant gaps in our holdings as a result. She's also planned and implemented regular rotations of the collection in our gallery dedicated to the presentation of Korean art, cultivated relationships with new donors, and planned a series of special exhibitions that have made Korean art a staple of our public programming. And here you see a few slides that illustrate this. This is a view of one of the works in an exhibition that paired white porcelain of the Chosun dynasty with contemporary photographs by a noted Korean photographer that she installed in our galleries in the Perlman building. A very, very beautiful installation that paired old with new, brought the past into conversation with the present in wonderful, wonderful ways. And here you see another view of that gallery. So in sum, the increased attention that has been given to this field, that is to say Korean art, within our own institution boils down to 3 key factors. First, the additional resources that have been devoted by the PMA to staffing and programs. Secondly, a commitment to the ongoing development and active utilization of the collection, not simply its cataloging, but growing it and doing more with it. And thirdly, and I would argue most importantly, the sense of passion and purpose, and Hyun-Soo possesses both in abundance, that can be created and sustained by a talented and engaging curator. And here, just to round out this story, you can see a view of one of the installations that Hyun-Soo has done in our dedicated gallery of Korean art in the last few years. So the first part of the title of my talk this morning, Make No Small Plans, comes from a saying attributed to Daniel Burnham, who was one of the dominant figures in American architecture and planning more than a century ago. When describing and justifying the grand and visionary new plan that he had devised for the city of Chicago just around 1900, he spoke about the value of dreaming big and thinking expansively about the future. Modest plans, he observed, quote, have no magic to stir men's blood, end quote, or the ability to inspire us to think beyond the limitations of what we do today. The astonishing progress, economic progress of South Korea during the past half-century, which has now achieved a scale that one may have been believed to be entirely disproportionate to its size or its resources, is a perfect example, in fact, of what Burnham had in mind. Although many might be understandably satisfied with the considerable progress that we have made during the past decade in placing the study and appreciation of Korean art on a much firmer basis at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I prefer to have us build ambitiously on this foundation and, quite frankly, do a whole lot more. In the time I have remaining, and I hope I do have a little more time, I'd like to sketch out for you what I have in mind, and to do so by referring to a significant project that we are now in the process of developing. Conceptually, there are several key elements to this project that represent a significant departure from current practice for us, and I believe point the way to the future. And as our curator pointed out to me before I came to the podium, she said, please make sure that everyone knows that this is an image that's created through the magic of Photoshop. It doesn't exist now, but it is the shape of things to come. And we will have banners, of course, up on our museum in about 6 months' time, heralding the arrival of a major exhibition of Korean art. So this project is indeed a special exhibition that will present the first major survey of the art of the Joseon dynasty ever to be shown in the United States. It is, to be sure, an ambitious undertaking, covering a great span of time in Korean history and seeking to provide a comprehensive portrait, and I underscore comprehensive portrait, of the artistic and cultural accomplishments of the period that created them, of a type that has rarely been attempted, that is rarely attempted anymore by museums in our country. This is, as I noted a moment ago, the first exhibition to survey the Joseon dynasty in its entirety. And the fact that it is regrettable, not only because great museums like ours should continue to take on big subjects, but also because projects of this scope remain one of the best ways to convey the scope and character of Korean culture and the achievements of Korean art to audiences in our country. It is, to make this point in another way, one thing to present a relatively small selection of Korean ceramics, painting, and metalwork in galleries devoted to the display of our permanent collection. And here I should remind you that we have only one gallery, a relatively small one at that, devoted to the presentation of Korean art. And it is an entirely different thing to devote the time and resources to a major exhibition of Korean art that will raise public awareness and broaden our understanding of a subject and a culture about which Americans, even today, know relatively little. And for this reason, we need to do a whole lot more. So just briefly, this survey will cover a number of subjects, more than 5 centuries, of course, during which the Joseon dynasty ruled and created a culture that is still very much in evidence in Korea today. It will not be organized stylistically or by media, but rather thematically, highlighting key aspects of the culture of the Joseon dynasty, such as the royal court and the role it played in both leading and regulating Korean society in ways that are probably truly unfamiliar to American audiences today, but would certainly be instructive, in my opinion. Let's see if I can move this along. So you just saw one of the great screens that stood behind the thrones of the Korean rulers. One of these great distinctive aspects of Korean art and Korean culture are these wonderful manuscripts, illustrated manuscripts with rituals displaying the rituals of the Joseon court. The exhibition will cover, among other things, the structure of Joseon society, including with the court, but certainly extending into the roles played by various people in Joseon society. Here, portraits of a scholar and a court official, I believe, with different rank badges. It will explore the continuing presence of Buddhism in a culture that officially sanctioned the practice of Confucianism, and we will indeed bring a 40-foot tall Buddhist banner painting to Philadelphia and put it in our great stair hall. And this, again, yes, is photoshopped, but this will come to pass in the not-too-distant future if we figure out the engineering, which I'm sure we will. And it will include an examination of the changes that occurred in Joseon society over time, especially in the late 19th century as Korea opened itself to contact with the West. So let's see what comes next here. Okay. Now, if the scope of this exhibition is ambitious, so too are our plans for it. After its premiere in Philadelphia next March, please mark your calendars, it will travel to the Los Angeles Museum of Art, and then to the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. This itinerary, 3 museums in about 12 months, will ensure that this survey of Korean art of the Joseon dynasty will be seen in 3 of the 5 most populous metropolitan districts in the United States, including Los Angeles, which has our country's largest native Korean and Korean American population, and in 3 museums that have made a sustained commitment to to presenting the arts of Korea in their galleries. Now, engaging not only our traditional audiences, but also Koreans and Korean Americans is an important objective of this exhibition, as it has long been for our Korean Heritage Group. The difference now is that we have an instrument to do so, a major exhibition that will be widely promoted and targeted to Korean Americans and Koreans in our country in very specific ways. In the past, we have had very few opportunities to do this on a broad basis, which for the Philadelphia Museum of Art actually means reaching out to these audiences across the entire northeastern United States from Boston to Washington, D.C. This exhibition, again because of its scope and its content, provides us with a wonderful opportunity to expand our audience development activities, both to make new friends and to strengthen existing relationships. The point of such an exercise, of course, may seem entirely self-evident to you, but it is nonetheless very important if we wish to broaden the understanding and appreciation of traditional Korean art and culture in our country. Trying to do so through research on our collections of Korean art or by the reinstallation of galleries in which museums like ours present their permanent collections are not sufficient in and of themselves to accomplish this goal. A broader approach, in my opinion, is required to achieve it. Ambition and scale matter, and in this regard, it is important to understand and fully appreciate the role that can be played by major exhibitions like Korean art of the Joseon Dynasty. Now here I'm just going to pause and say one thing that has made me, of course, entirely happy about this project, but also surprised me a bit, is that in the 4 years that I've been in Philadelphia, we have raised more money for this particular exhibition, nearly $1.7 million to date, than any other show we have done. And that money has come from a variety of sources, some from in Korea, but much more from the United States itself, from organizations such as the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Luce Foundation, but also from many other agencies and individuals. There's a broad and deep interest in having these kinds of exhibitions presented in this country, and I think the funding we've received for this project is an example of that. Now, let me continue to talk about audience and about how we engage people with Korean art, particularly historical Korean art in the United States. As we have thought about how to present this exhibition to audiences in our country and asked ourselves, how can we make historical Korean art and culture come to life in the present day, we have turned time and again to the question of programming. Simply put, how can we capture the attention of the audiences we want to reach and encourage them to see the exhibition and become engaged with the story it tells? What has been clear to us from the very beginning is that programming is a key to answer this question. Counterintuitively, perhaps, we've decided that this is not the type of exhibition that will benefit from a lot of scholarly or art historical programming to be presented while it's up. The catalog will do that work. Many scholars will come to see the show. Many classes in Asian and Korean art from local universities will do so as well. And to be sure, we'll present our fair share of art historical lectures and the like. But the key opportunity, in our opinion, is to invite visitors to the museum and then into the exhibition through contemporary programming. That is to say, programming that is about Korea today. Thus, we have developed a broad range of options from contemporary Korean music and film, including the wildly popular costume dramas on the Joseon Dynasty that air on Korean television and have a devoted following actually in our own country, to Korean food and Korean fashion. Now, the point here is not that we're doing a lot and doing many diverse things with our programming, but rather this point, that bringing the past into conversation with the present is, for me, one of the most important ways that we can make history and our shared cultural heritage come alive for new audiences in the present day.
I'm sorry, Director, your time is already up, so please conclude your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. If I could take just a few more minutes. I'll be done, I promise. Now, much of this programming, indeed, one of the principal ways in which we set about organizing this exhibition will be collaborative. That is to say, from the outset, we've seen the development of this exhibition as succeeding only to the degree that we would leave ourselves open to the possibility of working with many different partners. In this regard, there are indeed many different and enthusiastic stakeholders who share the goal of fostering a broader understanding of Korea and Korean art in our country. This has led, no surprise, to conversations and collaborative planning with Korean churches and schools, with the University of Pennsylvania's Korean Studies program, and with Asian Studies programs in colleges and universities throughout Pennsylvania, as well as in nearby states, to marketing partnerships with the Korea Times and other journals that directly serve Korean audiences in the United States, with 2 other museums in major cities in our country, and most importantly, with sister institutions here in Korea, most notably our organizational partner, the National Museum of Korea. And I'd like to thank its present director as well as its past director for their wonderful and steadfast support. This list is by force of circumstance incomplete and intended to only to illustrate the various types of productive partnerships that projects like this can engender and should engender, and to make a point that the work we do together around a common goal can yield a far greater return than we do alone on any investment that we make in fostering a greater understanding of Korean art and Korean culture. It was here, in fact, in Seoul that the first conversation about this exhibition took place about 3.5 years ago with Dr. Che Kwon-shik, who was then director of the National Museum. When I broached this subject with Dr. Che and indicated to him our interest in collaborating with the National Museum of Korea, not only on the development of an exhibition of Korean art that would tour the United States, but also on an exhibition of American art. And here you see a picture of the NMK, if I may call it that, last February when we opened Art Across America with our colleagues here at the National Museum. It was clear to me that he understood the implications and, more to the point, the benefits of working in this way and the promise it held for the future. And although I don't have time this morning, I should say that this was an exchange of exhibitions that allowed us to structure this work economically and otherwise in a way that was beneficial to both institutions, both the National Museum and to the consortium of museums in the United States that worked on this. So to conclude, and I'll conclude with a vignette from the exhibition which shows a wonderful set of 18th century furniture from Philadelphia as well as a painting by one of Philadelphia's first great painters, Charles Wilson Peale. To conclude, the future of our a program to encourage a greater understanding and appreciation of Korean art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art began with a foundational commitment to the cataloging, presentation, and continued development of our collection, and the gathering of resources to enable us to achieve this goal. A key step along the way was the creation of a curatorial position to provide proper stewardship and care for this collection and to serve as an advocate for its growth and utilization, and that has unfolded in wonderful ways. And now we are strengthening our commitment and moving in a new direction, first by taking on a much larger project in the field of Korean art than we have ever attempted before, and secondly, by looking outward and working in partnership with many other organizations, both in Korea and the United States, to achieve these very same goals. As the old saying goes, many hands make light work, and working together, we can ensure that an understanding and respect for the achievements of Korean art and culture continues to grow both in our country and abroad. Thank you.
네, 대단히 감사합니다. 저희가 앞에서는 이제 그 대형 박물관의 사례를 들었고,